This is a lecture about Sachplakat. Sachplakat literally means object poster. Sach is object, plakat is poster. It's a style that was invented by the German graphic designer Lucien Bernhardt. We'll talk more about him in a moment, but part of what makes it such a popular style is kind of the fantastic way that Bernhardt comes up with it. He wins a poster competition for the Priester Match Company, and this style is just so revolutionary and interesting that it becomes the style associated with this really important advertising firm in Berlin, Holler Baumann Schmidt. Eventually, Bernhardt opens his own firm, which employs more than 20 graphic designers. So you can see how this stylistic innovation leads to some very concrete professional gains for the discipline of graphic design. So here it is. This is the Priester Match poster that Bernhardt designs and wins the competition in 1905. He has this really elaborate story about how he conceives of it. The competition was common in those days. Lots of companies would have them because there aren't many graphic designers as professionals out there. And so it was common to get a public person to just do it for you. And if you make it a competition, it's the same as today. It's sort of advertising in and of itself. Anyway, so Bernhardt tells this whole story about how he started by making this look very much like an Art Nouveau poster. There were two cigars in a ash can, and there was smoke coming out of them in this like swirly graphic design way that was really popular with Art Nouveau. But he showed it to a friend, and the friend said, "That looks like it's an ad for cigars." And Bernhardt was like, okay. So then he found himself taking away every single thing that wasn't part of the matches. And what he ends up with is this: 2 matches and Priester, the name of the company. He says that he didn't even rescale the matches, but I'm guessing that he probably did, just because of the really lovely way that the size of the matches aligns with the size of the text. But what's also interesting about this is that there is a story at all. The idea of artists telling stories about how they created their works of art, that's very old. You go back to Michelangelo and Leonardo and you get those types of stories. But for a graphic designer to have a whole origin story for his particular poster, that is unheard of. So it's very important that in the 20th century, there exists a space even for graphic designers to tell their stories like this. So let's compare it with some other things from around the same time, because if you notice, 1905, that's the same time as Behrens is starting his work for AEG. What Bernhardt does is really different though, right? So we thought of Behrens as being very spare and geometric, but in comparison with the Bernhardt, it's ornamental. Now both of them do center the object, the product, in the very center of the image. And so you can see in that way it's the same. But otherwise, Bernhardt's poster is far more stark. And if you compare it to Mucha, it's like a totally different world. So this poster, it's hard to believe that the beer poster on the right is only 7 years older than the Priester ad, right? It's just so completely different. Both of them do have the product in the center, but the Mucha is far more about the experience, right, of encountering a perhaps intoxicated young woman while you're drinking this beer. Whereas the Bernhardt, it's just about the matches. And this is part of what makes Art Nouveau go out of style, honestly, because in the Art Nouveau period, most of the people commissioning these posters were forms of entertainment. So it was, cabarets or perhaps some type of alcohol. It's okay to have this, these fun-looking scenes with that. But if you're selling a light bulb, if you're selling matches, if you're selling spark plugs, as we'll see momentarily, you want something perhaps a little bit more serious. So here's another Bernhardt. This is for Spark Clubs by Bosch. And again, what you see is what you get. There is a spark plug. It's sort of near the center. I love the angle that he uses. And then the way it kind of rhymes with this on the other side, creating a triangular composition. The off-center Bosch label is also really engaging. Very simple colors, blue, orange, blacks, and whites. That's all that's going on here. But but what is on display is the product, the spark plug, and what it does, the spark. Here's another example of a graphic designer working in this style. This is Julius Klinger, and this is for a chandelier factory. Now notice we see that they're signing them, right? Like here's Klinger's name down here, and then here's the ad firm, Hollerbaum and Schmidt. And if you look at this, in some ways it really should remind you of the AEG ads because it has those small circles that are like light emerging from the hanging bulbs. But again, it's very simple, right? Just like it's just the chandelier, a pretty mod chandelier also. This is Hans Rudi Ert. This is an ad for Opel, the car maker. This one's a little bit different, right? Because you don't really see the car except for perhaps you could say the O of Opel is sort of like white-walled tires. Opel had recently released a racing car, and so this is perhaps supposed to be glamorous like that. You have this aristocratic-looking man in his driving cap and goggles looking out at you, encouraging you to buy an Opel car. Here's another example. This is by Ludwig Holbein, and it's for a men's apparel store. And you can see this one looks very Japanese, right? It has the flat background, it has the dense flat patterning on his breeches, but similar to the Sachplakat style, what you see is the product. So it's all about his clothes. It's not necessarily about him. And it's also on some level kind of selling the lifestyle, but it's, you know, it's not the playful ornamental style that we associate with Art Nouveau. All of these designers that we just discussed are at work during the Great War to produce propaganda posters to support the German cause. So a little background on World War I. It starts on June 28, 1914, when the Archduke of Austria-Hungary is assassinated in Sarajevo by a Serbian nationalist who resented Austria-Hungary's domination of Balkan states. There are secret treaties that are then enacted, and we have a war between the Allies, Britain, France, Italy, Russia, and eventually the United States, and the Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Turkey. The scale of this war is unmatched, 20 million casualties, 33 million wounded, and the use of civilian soldiers is also unprecedented. Basically, they need young men to volunteer because everybody that was already in the army dies. And so in order to get those recruits, they invest heavily in propaganda posters to get people to join the cause. So we're going to be looking at some examples of that on the German side. So this is one by Lucien Bernhardt, and this is that is the way to peace. So what this is selling actually are war bonds. So they want German people to buy bonds to help pay for the war, and the idea is that you'll get the bond back when the war is over. Well, we all know how that went. Anyway, so let's look at what Bernhardt does here. This is the hand of a knight, and it's kind of the fist is going through the poster, and it's punching this text that's produced in that black letter font that we talked about in the very beginning of the semester. So this is supposed to be nationalist. It's very German, right down to the image of the knight. So this was meant to evoke German prints by Albrecht Dürer. This is an engraving, and the lines of it really are similar to early German prints. This is one of my favorites just because of the really clever way that it integrates text and image. This is by Hans Rudi Ert. He's the same guy that did that Opel ad earlier where the O was also the white-walled tire. Here the U-boats are out. The U of U-boats also becomes the submarine itself. So the Germans had exceptional submarines that were really effective at sinking major ships from their enemies, and you can see here that the U of U-boats now becomes kind of like the base of the periscope where the officer is peering through looking for another the next victim, and up you see both like what's the view from the periscope and the officer himself in the periscope. And then here is the last one we'll look at by Julius Klinger. This is for the 8th War Loan. And here the number 8 also becomes like a chokehold on the enemy. That is the snake. So they're really very clever and very modern the way that they're going about their war posters. Now, whether these were effective or not is a matter of debate, and that's something that we'll be talking about this week.